Working opportunities that are available in Japan, and there's never been a better time to think about a career in Japan, as companies there are looking to recruit more and more international staff to support their increasingly global business strategies. And here to tell us more about the job market in Japan and how you can go about conducting a job search, we have Kiko Hill, who's from Disco Inc., which is a recruitment agency that specializes in work opportunities in Japan. So, Kiko.
Thank you, Hal, for your kind introduction. And hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to today's presentation. My name is Kiko Hill, and I work for a Japanese HR consulting company called Disco, which, despite the confusing name, actually specializes in Japanese English bilingual recruitment. And what we aim to do as a company is essentially connect bilingual job seekers with companies in Japan and all over the world that are looking to recruit global talent. So Keio University and the British Council were very kind to invite me here today to talk to you about the current job market in Japan and go through what kind of job opportunities are available for international job seekers in Japan, as well as how to go about getting a job there. So I'd like to first start with a very short self-introduction, or jikoshokai, as they say in Japan. I myself studied Japanese at the University of Manchester from 2008 to 2012, and I spent my year abroad in Japan during my third year at Yamagata University in the north, as well as Osaka University in the west. And after graduating in 2012, I was hired by Disco, first of all going to work in their Tokyo office for a year and a half, before then transferring to their UK office here in London. Now I'm lucky enough to enjoy regular business trips back to Japan, and also very importantly for me, I'm able to use my Japanese degree in my day-to-day job, which I think is quite key. But for anyone else who is interested in studying Japanese or studying in Japan or working in Japan and so on, I'm personally very passionate about trying to deliver those kinds of opportunities to individuals such as yourselves. When I tell people that I work or have worked in Japan or work for a Japanese company, I get asked a lot of questions. One of the first questions that I always get asked is, does the Japanese commute really consist of being squished onto a train by Japanese train conductors like this? This is only going from my personal experience. Obviously, everyone's experiences are probably going to be different. But personally, I found this to luckily be false. So on average, Japanese public transport runs very smoothly, is very efficient, unlike certain public transports that you get over here in the UK. And I personally found my daily commute to work, living and working in Tokyo, to be very pleasant. Another question that I get asked very commonly is, are Japanese toilets really as high-tech as legend would have you believe? This I actually found to be true. So your average toilet in Japan, including the toilet that we have in our head office in Tokyo, for example, will normally consist of various heat settings for your seating pleasure. It might also have a lid that rises and falls as you approach and walk away, as well as several bidet settings and also audio settings that help to conceal the noises of whatever you're doing on the toilet. Another question that I get asked is, do Japanese salarymen, or businessmen, as they are otherwise known, really get this drunk? This I also found to be true. Drinking culture in Japan, especially drinking with clients or colleagues after work, is a big part of company culture. And the nice thing about Japan is you can actually dine out for very cheap, even in central Tokyo, and enjoy really nice quality food and drink. And another thing that I think is so amazing about Japan is the fact that the crime rates are so low that you can actually get this drunk and still get home safe without being mugged or kidnapped, which I think is just fascinating. Fourth question that I get asked very commonly, this one's slightly more serious, and it's, do Japanese companies really care that much about, etiquette and business manners? In other words, is it really as strict and scary as people would have you believe? This I found to be both true and false. So working for a Japanese company in Japan, I found that there were certain situations where etiquette, business manners, and so on are paramount. And if you're not displaying the correct business manners, then you're probably going to end up offending a lot of people without meaning to. However, having said that, I found that my day-to-day working life in a Japanese office was very friendly, very relaxed, and not at all strict and stressful. This is something I really think that depends on the kind of company that you work for. If you work for a very old traditional company in Japan that has traditional values, for example, then the working conditions might be slightly more strict. Whereas there are plenty of companies in Japan nowadays that aren't as strict as people might have you believe. And then final question is, do all people in Japan dress like this? This, I'm afraid, I found to be false. I'm sorry if I'm crushing your dreams if this is the main thing that attracts you to Japan, but there are certain parts of Japan, for example, Harajuku in Tokyo, where people might dress like this at the weekends, or if there are certain events going on, people might dress in this way. But on average, day-to-day, people generally don't look like this in Japan. But overall, from my own experiences working in Japan, I can honestly say that it's given me some of the best memories of my life. And for me, it's very important that I keep that connection with Japan and I'm able to go back regularly. In terms of what kind of job opportunities are available for international job seekers in Japan, I'd just like to have a look at some global recruitment trends. There are currently several trends happening in Japan that you'll be pleased to know make it much easier to find work in Japan as an international graduate. The first thing we have is an increased demand for global talent that is mainly being fueled by globalization. So this is true not just in Japan, but all over the world. As companies continue to globalize and as the world economy continues to globalize, corporations are increasingly in need of people that have international language skills, international experience, and so on, that will allow those companies to compete in a global economy. Another thing we have going on in Japan specifically is we have an aging population. This has actually created I do apologize, that should say a seller's market, not a buyer's market for job seekers in Japan. But what it means is, as a job seeker in Japan, there are currently more jobs available than there are people to fill those positions. So if you are a graduate level job seeker, there are plenty of opportunities to work in Japan. In July 2016, this year, the unemployment rate fell to just 3%, which is the lowest it's been in 21 years. And as the population continues to age, they're going to need to be getting in more and more international graduates from overseas. And then finally, another thing that is specific to Japan is we also have something called Abenomics. For anyone who is not familiar with Abenomics, Abenomics is essentially a series of economic policies that were introduced by Prime Minister Shinzo Abe back in 2012 when he was elected for his second term as Prime Minister. And Abenomics has a very strong focus on internationalizing Japan and globalizing Japan more and more. So, for example, one of their goals is to increase the number of foreign students in Japan to 300,000 by 2020, and also increase the number of Japanese students studying abroad, such as here in the UK, to 120,000 by 2020. But these are all things that are happening in Japan right now that make it a more and more attractive market for international job seekers to go and work there. In terms of specific reasons that Japanese companies give for wanting to hire international graduates, these are some of the reasons that were given by our clients that we work with. And the number one reason that we see year on year is they want to hire excellent personnel. So this might sound very vague. I was very confused when I first saw this as well. But what they basically explain is when they think of an international or a global candidate, they think of not just someone who has bilingual language skills, for example, but if you think about what it takes to go after an international career and actually work abroad, that normally takes very good organizational skills as well. You need to have drive and ambition, and that's what the companies look for in an international candidate, is not just do you have international experience or language skills, it's do you have that drive and ambition to achieve results as well. Other common reasons include working with foreign trade partners, working with foreign branch offices, or bringing more global thinking to the company. What we essentially see is Japanese companies are wanting to hire international graduates so that they can gain a different set of skills to what they would be able to hire just domestically. I think it's true not just in business, but in life in general. The more diverse a team, usually the stronger that team is as well. So for example, if you have a football team that's made up solely of strikers, you're not going to have as strong a team as a football team that's strikers as well as defense, midfield, and so on. So they're looking for a range of skills. In terms of what skills are most in demand, these again are what we hear from our clients. these are the topmost skills that are looked for in international candidates looking for jobs in Japan. And the top 3 skills that are most valued are, first of all, communication skills. This tends to be true not just in Japan, but with companies all over the world. Communication skills tend to be key to any kind of job role. And then in the case of Japan, you have language skills. So in Japan, not many people speak a very good level of English. So it makes life much easier if, as a global job seeker in Japan, you can speak at least some level of Japanese. And then finally, cultural awareness and adaptability are as well. From my own personal experience working in Japan, I found that the combination of language skills and cultural awareness and adaptability were probably what opened the largest number of doors to me, because etiquette in Japan is so important. So if you can combine the language skills with the business manners as well, that's going to be giving you the greatest number of opportunities to work in Japan or for a Japanese company. If you are very eager to work in Japan without learning Japanese, there are positions available as well. The first most common type that we see is getting a job with a big manufacturing or trading company that might be willing to hire people with experience in engineering, IT fields, or some kind of financial field. What this reflects is basically companies that are willing to hire people who don't speak Japanese because they want the other skill that that candidate can offer so much. So they might be willing to hire you and then either try and teach you Japanese themselves or try and work with you through translators as well. Another position that might be available is working for a company that uses English as its official company language. So companies such as Rakuten or Uniqlo or Honda as well this year announced that they were using English as their official corporate language. These kinds of companies might again offer positions for non-Japanese speakers. However, if the company had a choice between someone that could speak Japanese and who couldn't, 9 times out of 10, they would probably choose the Japanese speaker because that makes life easier for everyone. And then finally, you could get a job in Japan that simply doesn't require a high level of Japanese ability. So for example, teaching English or other languages in Japan is a good one because there's always going to be a strong demand for language teachers in Japan. And this allows you not just to go to Japan and work without already having a high language level in Japanese, but you can also use your time in Japan as a teacher to learn Japanese, learn the culture, and then potentially go on to get another kind of job if you should wish to do that as well. So that's quite a popular route for foreigners going to Japan without language ability. So just to sum up what makes a global talent, normally in order to have good business literacy, you typically need leadership skills, problem-solving skills, and communication skills. So these kinds of skills are going to be useful no matter what kind of job you do, no matter what kind of industry you work in. And what Japanese companies look for in global candidates, so international recruits, is people that can combine that business literacy with cultural adaptability and language skills. So we always say at Disco that a truly global candidate is someone who, regardless of where they are, regardless of what country they're in, can display the same kind of business skills and acumen that they would be able to display in their home country as well. From my own personal experience, I would say, whilst there are positions available for non-Japanese speakers in Japan, if there was one skill that you could give yourself to maximize your chances of working in Japan, it would be to try and learn Japanese. Not only because that's going to open up the most number of opportunities to you, but also you're going to find life in Japan much easier if you speak at least some level of Japanese as well. So, actually getting a job in Japan, how does it work? The Japanese job hunting process is very interesting because most major firms in Japan stick to an agreement to recruit according to the exact same schedule. And companies usually will never start their recruiting activities before a certain date, and they all start on the exact same date. So the overall recruitment schedule looks like this. This is for graduate job seekers. University in Japan is typically 4 years long, and the academic year will run from April to March. So in the student's 3rd year at university, that's when they are typically taking part in internships and also researching what kind of companies they might want to work for. And then on the 1st of March, a whole year before they graduate, that's when companies are officially able to start advertising job vacancies. So that's when you can actually start applying to those companies. And then on the 1st of August is when companies will officially start to interview candidates, with formal job offers starting to be given from the 1st of October. So if you are thinking of, for example, studying in Japan at university over there, or even if you're thinking of studying Japanese, for example, at university in the UK with a year abroad in Japan, it's useful to be aware of this schedule because it means that you know when Japanese companies are most active in their recruiting activities. If you're job hunting as an international graduate, companies don't necessarily stick to this exact schedule because they know that you can't necessarily job hunt in line with that. But if you know when the vacancies are coming out, then it gives you the greatest opportunity to research companies and look at what might be available. Voices from students in Japan. These are things that we hear from job seekers that we work with at universities in Japan. The first thing we hear is applications close early, so don't forget to check each company's deadline. So even though vacancies might all go online at the same time, the applications themselves can close fairly quick, especially with internship positions. If you want to intern in Japan or get some kind of work experience, these deadlines tend to close around 2 or 3 months before the internships even take place. So it's important to start research as soon as possible. Another thing, scheduling for multiple company presentations and interviews is difficult, so save time by going to presentations held on campus. So again, if you're at university in Japan or on a year abroad, many Japanese companies will go and visit university campuses to try and do company PR and garner interest. Some even come all the way to the UK as well. So if you're here at a UK university, then you might be able to meet with companies on campus here as well. Next tip, do your research. It can tremendously help in your job hunt. This sounds obviously very obvious, but you'll be surprised at the number of people who think of a kind of job that they would like to do and then just try and apply straight away without doing any kind of industry research or company research. But the more industry and company research you do, the stronger the position you're going to be in to actually tailor your applications to each company. A wide choice of companies can numb you into not making a decision at all. So again, because Japanese companies can recruit quite aggressively, try not to get overwhelmed by it. Just try and use that as a good filter process to meet with companies, research companies, and then figure out which ones you're genuinely interested in. And then job hunting is a good opportunity for you to reassess your career goals. So particularly if you do get the opportunity to intern or get some work experience, that in itself can be very useful in telling you whether you do actually enjoy working in a certain industry or if you'd actually maybe rather do something else. So you can learn early on exactly which way you want to try and steer your career. The whole point of doing an internship or work experience is to first of all get a feel of what it is like to work as a professional, particularly if you can get some kind of work experience with a Japanese company. Like I said, because business manners and etiquette in Japan is so important, if you have an opportunity to learn this, it can be incredibly valuable before you actually start work. Understanding the work, the companies, and the industries firsthand. And as I just said, so learning necessary communication and business manners. And the point is to try and do this all whilst you are still at school. That's going to maximize your chances of getting a job after you graduate. In terms of what types of internships are available, they tend to be broken down into 4 different sections. The most common type is simply interning with a Japanese company. Internships in Japan with these kinds of companies can be quite funny, as internships don't tend to be like Western internships in Japan. So whilst a Western internship might consist of work experience over an extended period of time, your average Japanese company internship is probably only going to be 1 to 2 weeks long. So it's much more short term, and what it essentially is an opportunity for the company to do some more PR and try and get people interested in applying. However, having said that, it is still very useful to try and get onto one of these short-term internships if you can, because one, it will look great on your CV and it shows that you are proactive in your job hunt. And also it gives you the opportunity to see the inside of a Japanese company. Another nice thing about them being so short-term is if you are a student, for example, they don't actually interfere that much with your studies, which is another benefit. Other types of internship include interning with an international school or organization. So some schools or partner institutions that have a focus on globalizing Japan might offer internships to work with them. These can vary in length and are usually unpaid, but again, are a good opportunity for getting over to Japan and having some kind of work experience there. Another type of internship that you get in Japan is the all-inclusive internship program. So this will typically require you to pay an application fee as well as a course fee if you do then decide to go for it. The reason being that the program essentially includes guaranteed internship placement. And then once they've placed you in an internship, they will also help with your accommodation, your insurance. They'll normally provide business training and consulting as well as a 24-hour helpline. So it's essentially like an all-inclusive package holiday, but a package internship instead. And then finally, this isn't so much an internship, but more working holiday. These tend to vary in length from 1 month to 6 months, and they can be either paid or unpaid. But you can typically get these kind of working holiday opportunities in the winter or summer, and they offer great opportunities to work in Japan in a non-corporate environment if that is what you would rather do. In terms of sources of information, the most common source is very simply looking online. That is where most students find information about job hunting in Japan. If you already know what company you're specifically interested in, you can go directly to the company website as well. And something else that we have in Japan, which is a very big deal, is job fairs. So the thing that makes job fairs in Japan quite different from Western job fairs is a lot of the time you can not just meet with companies, but also potentially hand out CVs, interview with companies, and potentially receive job offers on site as well. So they tend to be much more formal, much more serious. So why might you want to go? First of all, you can understand the company culture, you can meet with the company, as well as talk directly to employees. And because you're dealing with them face-to-face, you can also ask your own personal questions and get answers to those as well. And like I said, very importantly, if it is a formal job hunting event, then you might actually get the opportunity to meet with a company that can give you a job offer as well. Some tips for job hunting in Japan. The first tip is to dress appropriately. So I'm not sure if any of you have ever been in Japan and seen Japanese job seekers, but everyone pretty much tends to wear the exact same suit. It tends to be a black suit with a white shirt, and everyone looks exactly the same, but that's just how it's done in Japan, essentially. So if you can dress that way as well, it's a nice way of showing that you appreciate that side of Japanese culture and you're paying respect to it as well. Making an effort to speak formal Japanese. Like I said, even if you don't feel particularly comfortable using Japanese, if you at least make an effort, this is going to go a long way in, again, showing that you appreciate Japanese culture. Using polite gestures, projecting a positive attitude is incredibly important. A lot of Japanese companies, if they are hiring graduate-level job seekers, they understand that most of the time you're not going to have very extensive work experience, because if you're a student, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do full-time work experience a lot of the time. So therefore, they put a lot of focus on your personality. So it's not just about what skills and experience you have, but it's also about what kind of person are you. Would you be fun to work with? Would you be a good fit for the company as well? So personality is very important when job hunting in Japan. And then basic tips as well, such as taking notes, avoiding unnecessary accessories. And it's also very important to keep in mind that common sense in your home country doesn't necessarily translate to common sense in Japan. So just try and be a little bit sensitive to how things are done there and don't kind of stomp all over it if you don't really know the etiquette over there. So maximizing your chances of finding work. First of all, set clear goals. So start early on and try and figure out what it is you want to do and try and gain experience in that field if possible. Do your research. Again, this sounds very obvious, but the more research you do, the stronger the position you'll be in to actually job hunt. And then use the research as a basis for tailoring your applications to each company. You can participate actively by taking part in internships, careers fairs, and so on. And then once you've done that, you can then reflect on what you've actually learned in that time to make a decision as to what kind of career you would specifically like to pursue. Things you can do now. First of all, try and talk with people already working in Japan or for a Japanese company. A lot of the time they can give you very valuable tips or information that you might not have thought of. Try and understand Japanese values. Again, etiquette is so important in Japan, so if you at least make an effort to try and understand it, that's going to help you in a big way. Start researching various companies. That's something you can always start now, even if you're not a student yet at university. That's something you can get on with right away. And like I said, securing that internship or work experience as well, especially in the winter and or summer in Japan if you get the opportunity to go over there. I'm just coming up to the end of my presentation now and wanted to give you a quick introduction to Disco and our various events and services and how we can hopefully help you get a job in Japan. Like I said, Disco is a Japanese HR consulting company. We were founded in 1973, and we have our head office in Tokyo, as well as 6 other branch offices around Japan, as well as 2 international offices in London and in New York. And something that we're famous for in the Japanese-speaking community is we are the organizers of the world's largest Japanese-English bilingual job fairs. The oldest and most famous event that we do is called the Boston Career Forum, which some of you may or may not have heard of. This we have been running annually since 1987. And this year's Boston Career Forum is actually taking place today, right now, as we speak, over in the US. And through the years, we've helped to connect more than 160,000 job seekers with over 7,000 companies in the last 29 years. The career forums that we do take place not just in the US, but all over the world, including here in the UK, in Japan, in Australia as well. The London Career Forum is probably going to be most relevant to job seekers that are situated over here in the UK. This takes place every April. If you are going to Japan or studying in Japan or maybe getting some work experience in Japan, then the Osaka Summer Career Forum, the Tokyo Summer Career Forum, and the Tokyo Winter Career Forum are also great opportunities for you to meet with companies. And the thing that is key about the career forums is all the career forums are basically aimed at trying to connect Japanese-English bilingual job seekers with companies that are trying to hire that kind of talent. The 2 qualifications to go to a career forum are that you are Japanese-English bilingual. The language level can be anything from basic conversational all the way through to fluent. It doesn't matter as long as you speak some level of English and Japanese. And the second requirement is that you are either currently studying or have graduated from a minimum of a bachelor's level degree. So as long as you have those 2 things, then you qualify to come to a career forum. And essentially what the career forums do is they bring together the job seekers, like I said, with the companies and allow you to apply to companies, so actually apply to positions that they have on offer. Some companies allow you to do walk-in meetings as well, so even if you haven't applied, you can meet them face-to-face at the event and try and get an interview in that way. Company presentations and seminars, gather information, and very importantly, you can submit your CVs and potentially take part in on-site interviews at the career forum itself. So I was actually recruited by Disco at their London Career Forum in 2012. I went as a job seeker, having just finished university, and then 3 months after the career forum, after the visa was all sorted, I was working in Tokyo. So I can personally vouch that there are very, very real job opportunities available at these career forums. If you're interested in attending a career forum, they're very simple to register for. First of all, you simply need to register with CFN or careerforum.net, which is the official website for the job fairs. And then once you've registered with CFN, you can then register for any career forum event that you would like to go to. All of the events are obviously free as well. Another thing you can do is you can apply to companies before the event. So if you register for the career forum and you see companies that are going to be coming that you're already interested in, you can often apply to them online in the lead up to the event. And what this allows you to do is secure an interview on site before you actually get there. And that allows you to use your time much more efficiently and maximize your chances of securing a job. And then finally, at the event itself, you need to dress professionally to go to a career forum. So you don't need to wear the job hunting suit that everyone wears, but you do need to wear formal attire, and things such as jeans, t-shirts, trainers, unfortunately, aren't allowed in. So please make sure that you dress professionally, and also bring an English CV and a Japanese CV if you can as well. That brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. If anyone has any questions, I believe there's going to be a mic going around now. And if you have any questions that you don't manage to ask now, I'll be upstairs in the booth for the rest of the day, so please feel free to drop by. Finally, if you would like to receive these slides as well, I also have a sign-up sheet available where you can come and give me your email address, and I'll be emailing these slides out to anyone who wants them afterwards as well. So, yeah, thank you very much for listening.
Okay, so any questions for Kiko? Just a general query about dependents, so partners, and if people have children, how that can make an impact on finding a career in Japan.
I would say usually Japanese companies tend to be quite good about offering welfare packages for dependents or if you're married or have children and so on. So that, I mean, it would probably have an effect on the application, but not necessarily in a negative way. It would just involve more kind of preparation and making sure that the company can make the necessary arrangements to support not just you, but your family as well. But that's something that shouldn't be an obstacle working in Japan at all.
Any more questions?
Hi there. Are the working hours as long as everybody says they are? So like from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night?
This, I think, it does depend on the company. And I know for a fact that there are companies that do have that kind of working life. Personally, I wasn't required to work those long hours at all. And Disco is obviously a Japanese company. It's not a foreign company at all. And there we weren't working that long as well. So I think that one really depends on the company that you're going for, as well as the industry in which you work. But I think it tends to be, not always, but it tends to be the case that the older, more traditional Japanese companies might employ that kind of working lifestyle over newer companies. Or another thing is you could try and look for a job with an international company in Japan. They're probably less likely to employ that kind of lifestyle as well.
I was wondering if I was to apply for basically pretty much any job in Japan, would I have to change my CV to be a Japanese style, or does it have to be English and Japanese, or is anyone fine?
Either's fine, to be honest. It depends on what kind of position you're going for. So if you're going for a position that requires a high level of Japanese, as an international job seeker in Japan, it would be highly beneficial to prepare a Japanese CV, because that is a really good demonstration of your Japanese language ability. So I would say if you can prepare a Japanese CV, usually that's going to be beneficial, but it's not necessarily a requirement for all Japanese companies.
Hi there. Hi there. I was just wondering if I could ask more in terms of creative employment. Do you offer any jobs in the creative industry?
Unfortunately, that's one area that we personally don't work with that much. But having said that, pretty much every sector in Japan is increasingly in need of hiring internationally. So even if we personally don't work with them, I have no doubt that those kind of opportunities would be more and more available to you. It's just a case of if you already know exactly what kind of industry or what kind of companies you might be interested in working for, I would recommend going directly to those company websites to see if they have any positions available for non-native Japanese speakers, or people, maybe sometimes they want people that can speak native level English or other languages as well with Japanese, in which case that would probably be the best way to filter those out.
I just wanted to know, how strict are they on being late? I've heard a lot of Japanese companies, they penalise you quite bad. So if you're on the train as well, they actually give you a note, don't they? If you're if the service is down or something, they take it really seriously.
Yeah, I would say that being late in general in Japan is just a big no-no. So it's not just with Japanese companies, but in day-to-day life, even if you're meeting with friends or whatever, people generally aren't late. I think it's kind of seen as being quite disrespectful, because especially in a company setting, or if you're meeting with a client, if you're late, it suggests that you don't care that you're wasting the other person's time in a way. So if you're meeting with a client, 100% you need to be there on time. And with work as well, it's better if you can be there on time. With train delays and so on, trains in Japan are hardly ever delayed, so it's probably not going to be a problem. But if you are delayed on a train, I know that with Disco, for example, if you just drop everyone an email to say, oh, sorry, I'm on this train which has stopped, that's enough. You don't need to collect a slip from the station or anything like that. But as long as you can make it clear that the reason you're late is not your fault, then that's absolutely fine.
I had a question about availability of part-time roles in professional fields. I'm a user experience designer, so I design apps and websites for a living. And I know that in the UK, there isn't really much of a market for that. It's normally full-time roles. And in an ideal world, I'd like to study part-time in Japan and work there. So I was wondering whether, in general, not just specific to my role, whether the part-time jobs are available.
I would say, yeah. So we have something in Japan called hakken gaisha, which basically means a placement company or kind of part-time placement company. And these are essentially companies that will place you in. It could be anything from part-time to full-time, but it essentially means that you're employed not by the company that you're working for and placed with, but you're employed by that kind of agency that is sending you out to work with various different companies. So these kinds of contracts tend to be much more flexible. They can be short-term, they can be long-term, they can be full-time, they can be part-time. But because you're not a full-time employee of the company that you're actually working for, it tends to be a lot more flexible. You can come and go a lot more easily as well. So that might be something worth looking into if you're not looking for a full-time position.
Hi, I heard somewhere that it's more difficult to get a career over in Japan if you're over the age of 30. Is that true?
I think it depends on what you're looking for. So graduate level recruitment in Japan is very big business. So what you saw from the recruitment schedule a few slides back, where everyone kind of recruits according to the same schedule, that is essentially companies hiring graduates en masse every year. So what they're trying to do is get people straight out of university and get big groups of them joining the company. So if you don't fit that kind of target, then it's probably going to be more difficult for you to get a job in that sort of setting. However, if you're over the age of 30 and you presumably have extensive academic experience or work experience, then you're then in a position to use those skills to get a job in Japan rather than be a graduate level job seeker. It just depends on what skills you have to bring to the table. But from personal experience, I know a lot of foreign friends in Japan who got jobs there when they were in their 30s, and it doesn't seem to be that much of a barrier. It's just the way you job hunt isn't going to be the same as the graduate level job seekers.
We still have a few minutes left.
I have a question regarding the visa application process. How much is that of an obstacle in finding jobs?
I think it tends to not be too much of an obstacle if you are able to find employment with a company that is willing to sponsor you. So a lot of the time, if a company is trying specifically to hire foreigners, they obviously understand that they're going to need to help out with the visa application as well. So if you are going for a company that is actively trying to hire globally, they're usually very forthcoming and helpful in making arrangements for your visa as well. Another thing that you could do is, I know some people in Japan that went to Japan on a tourist visa, which you can usually stay in Japan for up to 3 months. And you can use your time in Japan to try and secure a job there as well, which then can be transferred from a tourist visa to a work visa. But I would say if a company is willing to hire you as a foreigner, that's usually a very big suggestion that they're willing to help out with the visa, and it shouldn't be a problem.
Hi, what job sectors does Disco recruit for in particular?
I would say most sectors are represented in our client base. However, the most common sectors tend to be finance, manufacturing, or IT. Having said that, like I said earlier, pretty much every kind of sector needs to recruit globally more and more nowadays. So if you go on CFN, you can do a filter search to see what kind of industries are recruiting for bilingual graduates. But it tends to be most sectors nowadays. There are barely any sectors that aren't recruiting globally at all.
Okay. Well, a huge thank you to Kiko Hill from Disco Inc. for a really informative presentation.
Thank you.